I know I keep asking what's wrong with the religious, but we keep running across videos made by ignorant idiots and honestly, absolutely nothing on the other side. Why is this the public face of religion? I don't know, you tell me. Because this is really a public relations nightmare, as if they care. Because they're really just doing it to themselves. And how stupid is that? Today, we're looking at a video on a channel called Luca from a guy clearly with a cold who ought to be looking for a box of Kleenex before he makes videos, but I guess that's neither here nor there. This is another clear example that there's something seriously wrong with the religious. Ignorance is not a virtue, but that seems to be all they've got. If the religious world would just learn to think first, or at all, they wouldn't look so stupid, and they'd stop getting their asses handed to them all the time. But they can't do that, can they? Because they really have no interest in that at all. So let's dive in and watch the ignorance fester. It's about all the religious know how to do, right?
Why I'm not convinced of atheism.
And just because of how he said that, those first 6 words, that proves that he has absolutely no clue what the hell he's talking about. This is incredibly common among the religious because most of the time they're just making shit up. Atheism is not anything to be convinced by because atheism makes no claims. Atheism is the lack of belief in God's full stop. It can't be that hard to understand, yet the religious, they never can they? They have to assume that atheism is some kind of religious faith because they can only see the dogmatic nonsense that they believe and then just mirror it onto others. This is not how that works. So this guy already has no clue what the hell he's talking about. And that's not exactly a surprise, is it?
We got the NASA shirt right there.
Sorry, was that supposed to be impressive? Just because you have a NASA shirt, that doesn't mean that you know a damn thing about science. I see this in a lot of religious videos, especially if you look in the background, they will pretend that science matters to them, but in practice, it doesn't at all. So you're not impressing anyone at all with that. Luca, knock it off.
But most atheists would say that they're not convinced of religion and that, no, I don't believe in Sky Daddy and we have science now and humanity has moved on. I'm not convinced of religion anymore. It's an old teaching.
Because there is no evidence for any of it, and it's the evidence that matters. I have this discussion with the religious every single day. Why don't I believe in their imaginary friends? No evidence. Why do I accept what I do? Because of the wealth of demonstrable evidence for it. The answers never change. Not that the religious will ever understand, because they are not interested in the truth. They just really want to believe. And that's dumb.
But I would actually say that I'm not convinced of atheism.
Because atheism doesn't make any claims that you need to be convinced by. Because you're an idiot. So this is a good time to go looking down into the comments on his video, and of course, as suspected, it's a bunch of atheists ripping this guy a new one. Now, to his credit, he is at least trying to respond, at least to a couple of comments, but he's just doubling down on his own stupidity and making a complete fool of himself in the process. This is the problem with religious ignorance, in that there's just so much of it to go around, and it is absolutely resistant to reality. This is really where the religious go so terribly wrong. They spend so much time in their childish safe spaces listening to the idiocy from the pulpit and in their stupid book, and then when it comes time to go out into the real world, they've been so insulated from reality that they don't have a clue what's actually going on, and they don't care. That's the worst part of it. They don't care. So long as what they believe makes them feel good and tingle inside, they don't care about anything else. So let's watch him proclaim his ignorance proudly some more, because hey, that sounds like a good use of our time, right?
So first I'm gonna tell more practical reasons that may not be as forcing, and then in the end of the video I'll give you kind of the argument that I would use if I were debating this. But I'm not a debater, I'm not a philosopher.
He's also not a rational individual or an honest interlocutor. He's proven that conclusively in his comments. He's just an ignorant idiot that really wants to believe whether what he believes is true or not. And he's terrified to ask any actual questions or seek out any demonstrable evidence for any of it. Now, some of that is just a guess at this point. It could be anything else, given that I haven't seen the rest of his video yet. I mean, we're 42 seconds in, and anything could happen in the future, but that's just based on what he said so far. I'm pretty confident that all of this is going to come to pass, or has already come to pass in other videos, because this is incredibly common among the religious. It's sad going into videos knowing that the theist is going to be a complete imbecile, but that's what we always do, right? We can call this stuff a mile away, because the overwhelming majority of them are. So let's see if I'm right this time, and get back to Luca's irrationality.
I'm just documenting my self-improvement and philosophy journey on this channel. So the first thing is that most atheists live inconsistently to their worldview.
Atheism isn't a worldview. Come on, you can't be this dumb. Atheism is the answer to one and only one question. Do you believe in any gods? If you say no, you're an atheist. That's all there is to it. Zero worldviews involved. Therefore, it is impossible to live inconsistently with our worldview if atheism isn't a worldview in the first place. Seriously, what the hell is wrong with these people? Oh, right, they're just projecting. They are taking all of the things that are true of themselves, and since everybody else has to be just like they are projecting that nonsense onto others. Except that is not how this works. This is why they make such ridiculous fools of themselves all the time. Because this is what they actually think. Sad, isn't it?
And you know, well, most atheists don't ever have any sort of philosophical training. But most atheists assume things like meaning, assume things like morals, but these things don't exist on atheism.
Of course they do. They aren't objective, at least for most atheists that I run into, but meaning and morals have absolutely nothing to do with atheism at all. Atheism is just that one question, remember? Anything else? It isn't atheism, it's something else. This is, again, where this guy is just out of his gourd. He hasn't talked to any actual atheists. He's just projecting his ridiculous beliefs onto others. This is what he's heard from other theists, not from any actual atheists. Because he doesn't actually care what we have to say. He isn't making this video for us, which is why he's gotten so soundly trashed in his own comments. Because he's just an idiot. Seriously, go blow your nose. This is why I get really mad at the religious, and it's very, very common among the religious, as we all well know, but their production values are just trash. There is such a thing as a second take, you know? Maybe go get a tissue and come back and try it again. I mean, I can't say that I never sneeze or cough or whatever. I just cut it out and do it again. What the hell is wrong with these people? Somebody, please explain.
But you have to assume these things to have a worldview at all.
Nope, those aren't necessarily part of a worldview, and as I've already said, atheism isn't a worldview at all, so he's just wrong regardless. He's just asserting it because his own worldview asserts those things, but that doesn't really mean anything, does it? You don't have to have meaning. You don't have to have purpose. You can go through life as a nihilist if you really want. I mean, I don't, but you certainly could. It's completely valid. He just doesn't like it, though, so he just insists that you can't do it, even though you demonstrably can. Why? Because everybody's got to be just like he is, of course. This is a major problem with the religious, and I don't know that it's only them, but they are a major culprit. They are so busy trying to insist that everybody is just like they are, that everyone really believes in their imaginary friends, that everybody really accepts the same things that they do, because they'd feel really bad if they didn't. And that's what this is all about, isn't it? Fee-fees. That they refuse to stop and listen to anyone else around them because they're saying things that don't agree with their fee-fees and their faith. That's what proves that they're wrong. But they don't care, do they? This isn't about coming to the best understanding of the real world based on facts and evidence that they can achieve. It's about coddling their own childish feelings and wishes and dreams. And that is not a good thing. It just isn't.
To live your life, to live your everyday life at all. So most atheists are inconsistent, and most atheists have absolutely no idea what their worldview entails for them.
But you're not talking about any supposed atheist worldview, which doesn't exist in the first place, but I guess, hey, we can play make-believe. You are projecting your worldview onto others and saying that because people live inconsistently with what you believe, somehow they're wrong. Are you mental? What the hell is wrong with you? Because if this stuff starts to look familiar, it's because so many of them do it. They get told by people who have no idea what atheists are like that this is what atheists are like, and then they go out into the world thinking this is what atheists are like. And then they just make complete fools of themselves. This is not what atheists are like. At least it's not what I'm like, since I only get to speak for myself. So I look at these idiots and roll my eyes because not only are they ignorant, and they are, but they're proud of it. This is not something to be proud of. It's really not.
And yeah, that's basically the first reason. The second reason, this is probably the number one thing. If there's an atheist, I ask them about morals.
Expecting them to be just like you are and not really paying attention to what they say. Because this is something else we see all the time, right? Well, morals are objective. No, they're not. But they're objective. No, they're not. Yes, they are. They can't imagine that all the crap that they really want to be true isn't true. So when someone tells them that they disagree, they just have to insist that they were right all along because they can't handle the idea that they're wrong, or that there are differing opinions out there that don't agree with them. I bet we're going to see some more of that coming up. We'll have to see if I'm right? But I'd wager that I am. It's not exactly a difficult bet to collect on, though, is it? You'd think that as often as we see this, as often as we point out their mistakes, some of them might actually learn something. But no, that hasn't happened yet.
And most people have never even thought of this thing, which is kind of sad.
Looking in the mirror again, I see. Because clearly, you've never thought about any of this. You're just doing what you've been programmed from birth to do, whereas pretty much every rational atheist I've ever met has thought about this at length and come to whatever conclusions they've come to intellectually, not emotionally like the religious do. Because we don't care about your fee-fees and your faith. We care about the facts and following the evidence to whatever rational conclusion it happens to lead to. Not that they care because, as I said, they're only in it for the feels and never ever for the reals. Case in point, I'm currently having a discussion with a theist over consciousness, Every shred of evidence that we have proves that consciousness is an emergent property of the physical brain. You are what that 3-pound meat sack in your head generates. He doesn't like that. He doesn't want that to be true. He can't show how he knows that, but clearly he does. Just ask him. Because that's exactly what he wishes was the case. He wants to be special. And just being a piece of meat, that doesn't get him there, so it just can't be true, right? Because these people are irrational morons. What the hell else is new? Will you just stop that? Seriously, what the hell is wrong with anyone who would leave that in their videos? And the same thing is true of really obvious fuck-ups. I see videos go by where the person on screen will make a string of very clear mistakes, and they just keep starting over. And apparently they never watch the completed video for quality control, because you get the mistake, and the mistake, and the mistake, and the mistake, and the correction, and it's all still there. What the hell is wrong with you? I'm not saying that you have to be perfect. I mean, I'm certainly not, but at least try. And these aren't people with 5 followers. These are people with thousands and thousands and thousands of followers. And clearly, they don't care enough to do any kind of quality control. Well, why the hell not?
But the atheists who have really got into this will be able to say like, yeah, morals don't exist, but moral relativism.
Make up your mind. Do morals not exist? Or is there moral relativism, which is, morals? Because he, like most theists, have it in their heads that morals can only be objective. Why? Because they really like the idea. But that doesn't mean anything. So anything that isn't objective morality isn't morality at all. Yeah, okay. Sorry, that's not how this works. That is not how any of this works. But again, these people are just projecting. They expect people who don't share their ridiculous views to share their ridiculous views, and when they don't, they pretend their opponents have no views whatsoever. Well, if you don't agree with me, you're just wrong. That's stupid, but look at who we're talking about. People who have never given any of this 1 second's rational consideration whatsoever. What they accuse us of doing while they're doing it demonstrably themselves. What is wrong with these people? All right, religious brainwashing. That'll do it.
On atheism, there are no morals.
Of course there are. There just aren't objective morals. And I can't even say that because there are atheist moral realists. Not a lot, at least not in my experience, but there are some. And there are a lot of people who are desperate to rationalize their way there. But again, that's not atheism. That's something else entirely, isn't it? Not that this guy cares or is even aware because, duh. The religious don't want to meet their detractors where they live. They insist on dragging them kicking and screaming to whatever makes the theist most comfortable and insisting that's where the opposition was the whole time. These are not honest interlocutors, but they don't care either. They wouldn't know honesty if it bit them in the ass, because there's something seriously wrong with these people. Of course there is.
There just is. If you're born on this planet and this planet that smashed into whatever life came out.
Talk about ignorant. They can't even speak intelligently about science. They don't know anything. They just really want to believe the nonsense in their silly books. They don't care if any of it is true. That's why they're so anti-education. If you know stuff, you might not believe the religious slop anymore. Can't have that. That's why it's such a complete waste of time to talk to these people, because, at least in my experience, most of them are like this. Maybe not this bad all the time, but if you ask them some very basic questions, most of them can't come up with an elementary school answer. They don't know, and they don't want to know. How pathetic is that?
There is no good or bad. There just is. There just is this physical matter.
Wipe your nose, asshole. Fuck off. But yes, there just is this physical matter. Learn to deal. It's like the theist I was talking about earlier who had an emotional desire to be special and couldn't handle the fact that all the evidence says otherwise. So he started playing word games. It's what most of them do. Not all, granted, but this is a constant problem with the religious. They are operating on a level of abject fallacy because they are desperately trying to rationalize their way back to their emotionally comforting beliefs, whether those beliefs stand up to any kind of critical scrutiny or not. Because, say it with me, they don't care. That's where this always goes wrong. They are conditioned to accept something that is not intellectually defensible and to reject anything that doesn't fit in with their preconceived notions because they are only after comfort, not fact. Facts are scary. They've always got excuses to get away from the facts that they don't like. I don't even know what to say to these people anymore, do you? If you do, let me know down in the comments.
That moves. There is no right or wrong. And you know, but most atheists would like to make some moral claims. Oh, you can't do that. Oh, you must support women's rights. Oh, you shouldn't marry a child. Oh, you shouldn't be murdering people. Why?
Because society has decided collectively that within that society, those things are not going to be acceptable. Because that's how morality actually works in the real world. It's how it's always worked, and it's how it's always going to work. Morality is inherently subjective, and all of the evidence that we have supports it. It isn't handed down from on high. It's what human societal groups do, and the religious don't like that because they have no actual grasp on reality. They just really want to believe, and that's just stupid. Anyhow, this is where we're going to stop for the week. Once again, a video that I fully intended to do in one gets to be two. There's just so much concentrated stupid in these videos that I have to stop every couple of words to correct the gross misunderstandings that the religious have. Not that they care, because they're not interested in reality. And that is positively pathetic, isn't it? What do you think of all this nonsense? Let me know down in the comments. Seriously, I wish I could find a theist with a brain anywhere. Anybody have any ideas? Because every single video that I look at, this is the kind of thing that we get. It's the same kind of abject ignorance and wishful thinking. And honestly, can the religious stop doing that? Please? I mean, learn something already. Granted, if they learned something, they probably couldn't be religious in the first place, which isn't at all a bad thing. Come over to reality already. Stop being an ignorant imbecile. It's honestly not that hard. Give it a shot because it would sure be nice if they would, wouldn't it? Who's with me?